Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Big Bout Podcast. This is John Suntress, your host. Now, this might be the first episode you heard, or you might have heard our first episode with the Dempsey Tunney documentary revisiting the long count that happened at Soldier Field, 91 years ago. But some of you might be asking, hey, John Suntress, I've never heard of you. What do you know about boxing? Or you might have listened to my other podcast, the Word Balloon Podcast, or the Aw Yeah Podcast with cartoonists Art Baltazar and Franco. And again, the question might be, what do you know about boxing? So let me give you my resume and the second episode, because we're going to be talking about the Canelo Alvarez Gennady Golovkin rematch, and also some speculation that we've heard about a possible rematch between Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. My guest today to talk about both fights is Mike North, a very famous sports talks commentator who did excellent work in Chicago at The Score, the great sports talk station in Chicago, and for several years on the Fox Sports Radio Network. So you might know Mike, and I'm guessing that a lot of Mike's fans might be tuning in because they might have seen on social media that I would be talking to Mike. But again, what are my qualifications? Happy to tell you. From 1989 till 2006, I covered boxing. I was just a beat guy. You know, I did occasional television in Chicago, but I did my reporting first for Ring Magazine, then Boxing Illustrated. That ended around 1994, 1995. But after and during that period, I also started doing radio reporting for boxing for a couple of the Chicago sports stations. First WMVP in Chicago, now ESPN 1000, and The Score, sports radio, now called Sports Radio 670. But through the years, covered boxing, went to Vegas fights for Boxing Illustrated and The Score, got to cover a lot of great fights of Julio Cesar Chavez, Roy Jones, Terry Norris, Mike McCallum. I'm throwing some names out there to you. Julian Jackson, the great Gerald McClellan, whose career was cut short. Like I said, Roy Jones, Lennox Lewis, Mike Tyson, covered every heavyweight fighter live with the exception of Riddick Bowe. Evander Holyfield, covered a couple of his fights as well, and up through about 2006. And that was the last time I covered boxing consistently. And then I took about the next 12 years off and was a fight fan again. Still working in radio in Chicago, but mostly behind the scenes, making commercials, occasionally being on air. And thankfully, I think the sport has gotten interesting again. Certainly the middle and lower weights with fighters like Triple G and Canelo and Vasily Lomachenko in the lighter weight divisions. And certainly the heavyweight division has gotten exciting again. So I felt it was time to come back. The reason why I didn't do it for the last 12 years, well, Vladimir Klitschko was kind of, sitting on the heavyweight division, beating everybody that they put in front of him. Finally, we got a decent fight last year with Anthony Joshua and Klitschko. Deontay Wilder, I'll be honest, I think it's a competitive heavyweight division because outside of fighting Luis Ortiz, I haven't seen Deontay Wilder have a competitive fight yet. So that's going to be interesting as his fights and Joshua's fights lead to their eventual matchup to finally reunify the heavyweight division once again. But there's a lot of interesting action going on, and certainly the sport has gotten more active. Thankfully, we're getting great fights again on ESPN. Even the run-of-the-mill weekly fights are not run-of-the-mill. They're incredibly competitive. And the pay-per-views have started getting interesting as well. Now, I got to be honest, as I'm sure a lot of you felt watching last week's fight against Triple G and Canelo, I wasn't satisfied with the decision. You'll hear about it in my conversation with Mike North. I had the fight 116 to 112 for Triple G. I really felt that while Canelo, it was a close fight, it was a competitive fight, but I really felt especially the HBO commentators were really not looking at the inside fight that Triple G was doing to Canelo. I thought rounds 2, 5, and 7 were kind of open and could have gone either way. But frankly, I gave Canelo the first round, and then after 6 rounds, I had Triple G ahead 4 rounds to 2. And then for the second half of the fight, I really had Canelo winning another, or I should say Triple G winning another 4 rounds and only giving Canelo 2 rounds. So again, 8 rounds to 4. I had it for Triple G, and I know I'm not alone. A lot of reporters that I respect also had it for Triple G or had it as a draw. It's very interesting, and certainly you have to scratch your head with Canelo being promoted by Golden Boy. He was the house fighter in this fight. And that's a little disappointing. And I got to say that I really felt while Triple G may not have been at the top of his game, I certainly felt he did enough to win the fight. I'll be interested to hear what you think of it as well. Give me your opinion of the fight, either on social media or you can email me, john@wordballoon.com, because the Big Bout podcast is part of the Word Balloon Network. But anyway, enough of my yakking. Like I said, I wanted to kind of give you my background and lead into this discussion about what we saw last weekend with radio sports talker Mike North, who is also a big fight fan. He and I made several trips over the years to see great fights at Madison Square Garden in particular. We saw Felix Trinidad beat what was left of Pernell Whitaker. He was kind of on his last legs as a fighter, but it was fun to watch him. We also saw an Oscar De La Hoya tune-up fight at the Garden. Those were the two fights that I happened to see with Mike. But again, as I mentioned, a lot of other fights that I got to witness. And in fact, in future episodes, I have a feeling we'll be talking about some of those fights that I covered and reliving them. Maybe sync up the way people do with a movie podcast. And instead of a movie commentary, I'll give you my description of the fights that I actually covered and wrote coverage for in Ring Magazine and in Boxing Illustrated, but also for radio on The Score for many years. As I said, and also the Sporting News Radio Network. I did a few fights for them as well. Oscar De La Hoya against Fernando Vargas, for example. But anyway, let's talk now about last weekend's fight with Triple G and Canelo Alvarez with Mike North on this second episode of the Big Bout Podcast. Mike North, welcome to the Big Bout Podcast. You know, you're my first guest other than as you know, the legends that I've had on the show before are Roger Kahn, a Bud Schulberg, a Studs Terkel. So you're in good company.
I feel like, hey, you know what, John, you and I, we've had a couple things in common. We like to entertain. We like to have a good time. We went to many boxing matches together. We went to Madison Square Garden, met Bud Schulberg. We saw Pernell Sweet Pea Whitaker, De La Hoya, all those fights that we used to go to.
Yes, so, Trinidad, Felix Trinidad.
We love the boxing game. We really, really do.
Yes, indeed, sir. And we had a big fight on Saturday night. Canelo Alvarez against Gennady Golovkin, Triple G, and it's the rematch. It was a smaller controversy. You know, it's interesting, Mike. I've been looking at all the writers that I respect all over the board, from The Guardian UK and USA Today, Kevin Ioli with Yahoo Sports, my guy Dan Rafael from ESPN. And it's a whole, like, you know, some people agreed with the judges and they had it for Canelo Alvarez. Some people had it, like we did, for Gennady Golovkin. Some people had it a draw. So it's very interesting that we're all these different opinions about the same fight.
I don't trust a lot of the boxing media, number one. I don't trust promoters, number two. And I'll also tell you this. I watched it again with the sound down. And I came out 7-5, Triple G.
I hear you.
I watched it before that with the sound up, and I would have given it to Alvarez 10-2 based on, or whatever the amount of rounds it was, 10-2 based on what I was hearing.
Yeah, the commentary from HBO. No, I agree.
My
well,
God.
It was a majority decision, Mike, and actually they had it closer. You know, it wasn't like Canelo with a walkaway. It was a close fight, and I had it 8 rounds. You had it 7-5. I had it 8-4. I had it 116-112. And no, I agree with you. I do think the HBO commentators, they were expecting a different fight because Triple G was not his usual aggressive self. He was the one circling, and it was interesting because in the first fight, he complained that Alvarez did too much on the outside and wouldn't stand his ground and fight him. You got to admit, and again, I agree with you. I thought Triple G won. Canelo brought the fight to him and did stand in the center of the ring, and he attacked. And that's interesting because Canelo's usually a counterpuncher. What's that?
What happened when he attacked? Nothing.
Well, he landed punches, but I agree with you. I thought Triple G landed more punches and won more rounds. So let me get this
straight. If I'm hearing what I'm supposed to be hearing, Muhammad Ali in half his fights wasn't aggressive. Muhammad Ali would lay up against the ropes. They had to invent a name called the rope-a-dope.
Yeah.
In other words, if you're not aggressive now, if you fight a smart tactical fight like Triple G did, man, you deserve points off. I've never heard such a nonsense in my life. Everybody's supposed to be Joe Frazier and walk into every punch, or Jake LaMotta.
Well, Mike, I agree. It is ridiculous, but I guess that what they call ring generalship. Who's dictating the fight? Where is the action starting from?
But did it really look like he was dictating to Triple G and moving him around? Triple G was smart. He was staying away because, come on, let's be honest, Alvarez hit you with one shot, you can go down. So I don't blame a guy for dancing around. It's funny. Sugar Ray Robinson could dance around. Muhammad Ali could dance around. De La Hoya did nothing but dance around. And this guy dances around and wins 2 fights, and he's got nothing to show for it.
No, I understand. I would say that I think Alvarez is not, at middleweight, is not the one-punch power puncher that Triple G is. And again, that's when I think the HBO guys were expecting from Triple G, and they were saying, where's the power? But the problem is, I do think Alvarez first of all, is a great fighter, was a very tough opponent, can obviously take a punch. Triple G can take a punch better, I think, and did. But I do think that Alvarez did land clean shots. A lot of those rounds were close, Mike. I really thought.
Right, I didn't say he didn't, but while they were saying where's the power, where's Alvarez's power?
Well, and I
why is one guy supposed to have power and the other guy not?
Mike, I'm shrugging. I don't disagree with you. And again, screw the HBO guys. Because again...
Well, that's what... You know what? Those HBO guys, I hear Max Kellerman goes, I just walked down Boxing Row and talked to the writers. A lot of them have my guy. He might as well set my guy, Canelo, ahead.
Wow.
I mean, he's like down there talking to him.
Yeah,
During the boxing match.
Yeah, that smells bad, and I think it's dumb to talk like that. Also... one thing I know you and I talked about Sunday morning when we first talked about planning to do this conversation was, well, he may be losing the fight, but he's winning the story. And it's like, what the hell does that mean? And you can swear if you want to, Mike, because I intend to. But seriously, what the fuck does that mean?
Let me ask you a question.
What the fuck does that mean?
We've known each other forever, and you've known me. I always have an answer for everything. But he's losing the fight, but winning the story. I have no idea what this average analyst, and I mean that with all my heart, and I'm not bemoaning the guy. I think he's average. And I think Roy Jones is a follower. I think he just does whatever Max seems to be doing, because it didn't make for an interest. They made it sound like it was 10-2.
Yeah, like they did. They did. Well, and it was interesting because Harold Letterman, who is a fine judge, was judging it completely differently, and they acknowledged that. And it's like, but again, Mike, I do think it was a close fight.
But Letterman felt bad because he decided to go. They're not courting the Russian audience. This is HBO, man. HBO and the United States of America and HBO, where I watch a couple movies every day in Spanish. They have a wonderful relationship. They like Alvarez. Triple G brings nothing to the table except that he's a nice guy. The boxing fans. They have a whole country that wants Alvarez. What's Russia bringing them?
No, I understand. Well, and you're right. And it was, by the way, of course, Mexican Independence Weekend, and there always is a big Mexican-involved fight.
And De La Hoya handled the fight, right?
Yes, he did.
And what heritage is he?
He's an American Mexican. Yes, he is.
Yeah, and two of the judges are all of them are De La Hoya friendly.
I don't know. I think
when you say you don't know the boxing promoters, John, was shady he's already had some shady deals.
Well, all I do know is they had it razor close, and in fairness, Canelo was, or I should say, Triple G Golovkin was not as aggressive as he normally is. Now that might have been a tactical choice, but knowing all this, knowing that he's fighting an American-friendly fighter. Sometimes you do it. I mean, we saw it happen with Sergey Kovalev had the same problem, Mike, against the American Olympian Andre Ward. And he had to fight twice as hard to get a draw in the first fight, and then in the second fight, he did lose by a knockout.
I'm not going to hide it, but I'll tell you this. If Golovkin has to knock out Alvarez, why doesn't Alvarez have to knock out Golovkin?
Well, I understand, Mike. I don't disagree with you. And again, this was the same problem that Sugar Ray Leonard and Marvin Hagler had with Leonard, because he fought a tactical fight instead of pressuring Leonard all those years ago. And this fight in some ways reminded me of Leonard Hagler.
Yeah, it did. And I will say this, though. I always thought, look, Leonard and Hagler and those guys, I always thought that those judgments, for the most part, were fair. Whoever won those fights, whether it be Hearns, whether it be Hagler, whether it be, there were very few surprises. You know, here was a surprise, and I know a lot of people that follow boxing. I talk to some people too, and you know what? Besides the boxing media, most people I talk to think that Triple G won,
sure,
and that there's two sets of rules. There seems to be two sets of rules for one fighter over the other. One fighter, and if that's the case, if aggressiveness is all that, then why didn't Alvarez lose the first fight?
Agreed.
He wasn't
Absolutely
aggressive.
agree. Absolutely. And I thought he did lose the first fight. So I understand. Yeah. Well, but another problem, Mike, is, and it's funny, I've been talking to my fight friends, and we talked a little bit about this off the record, was 12-round fights have to go. It has to go back to an uneven amount of rounds because we never had this problem in the 15-round era, even when it went to the scorecards. There were so few draws in the 15-round era, and that's because mathematically it was that much harder. Like we said, you had it 7-5, which would be 115-113. I had it 8-4, which makes it 116-112. And that's really, really close. And in my case, 8 rounds to 4. The guy won twice as many rounds as the other guy, and it's that razor thin because we're dealing with 12 rounds.
Well, here's
and
what
that's
I'm
wrong.
here.
That's just wrong.
I had it 3-3 in the first 6 rounds. So it's impossible from there. In my world, the way I had the final 6 rounds scored, and the 12th round I thought Triple G won. I'm not going to say Alvarez did a couple of the late rounds, but here's what I had it 8-4. Then I shut the sound down. But I also knew what they had been saying, and I also knew the outcome of the fight. So I said, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I went to 7-5 without the sound on. But I didn't know what happened with the judging and everything else. Was I influenced by that? Absolutely not. Did I give him the benefit of the doubt? Yeah, and he still won the fight by 2 rounds.
Well, and 2 judges had Alvarez 115-113. The third had it as a draw, which is why it was a majority decision.
Yeah, but the 2 judges had also, and they were both De La Hoya friendly big time, had Alvarez win the 12th round. I don't care who anybody talked to. I've been watching boxing 55 years. Alvarez did not do enough to win the 12th round. And
I agree.
That's where the fight is supposed to be. And by the way, you're right. We've talked about 13 rounds, but I feel like a Lily. Boxing at the top game should be 15 rounds. Period. I'm tired of the garbage. I'm tired of the safety issues. You get in that ring, you're making millions of dollars. They overcharged for that fight, number one. Okay, and they still made a lot of money. And the boxing game was that was their key fight in the last 3, 4, 5 months, and they give the cheater the benefit of the doubt. They would never bring up. They didn't bring up on HBO one time that I watched that fight. Well, don't forget the steroid issue or the issue with the big. They never brought that up, John.
Right. You're right about that, Mike.
How do you ignore that the
Well,
whole fight?
well, you're right. And again, it was a Golden Boy promotion, and Alvarez is a Golden Boy fighter. That's it. Well, the only thing I will say, it'll be interesting to see the replay because, in fairness, when HBO called the first fight, they called it a certain way, but they even said when we watched the video replay, we saw a different fight. And that's another thing that they really should think about doing. They already do it with judges, but I think telecasters should do it as well, and that is sit on different sides of the ring, not sit in a row.
What do you think, John, about putting the scores up at the end of each round?
Do you remember, Mike, back in the 70s, they did that with the Ali Shavers fight, and the audience in the arena couldn't see it, but the TV audience did see it, and Ali's people snuck a TV in the back of the arena, and they knew what was happening with the judges. I have no problem with it. Why not? I think be transparent. Now, I will admit that would also probably lead to a lot of boos from various factions of fans, and I don't know if that's necessary. So that's my only concern about that. But I think better, and again, especially from a telecast standpoint, I think it would be good to have all the reporters on different sides of the ring because they missed a lot of punches that Triple G landed on the inside that you and I saw watching the telecast.
Can I tell you something, John? I hate where hate watching a fight at ringside. I'd rather be up about the 15th row. You and I watched a couple fights there.
Oh,
you see the fight better. I'm sorry.
Well, it depends. It always depends, Mike, because I've had the pleasure of being right there on the apron and seeing local fights that way and even world-class fights that way. And I've also been up in the stands with you and my buddy Phil Berger, the late Phil Berger, who used to write for the New York Times, a great writer. And you're right. You get different vantage points. You're absolutely right.
We see our guy. We went to see Trinidad fight
against Pernell Whitaker. Yeah, that's right.
And I'll never forget. There was all the reporters' tables right along the bottom. Well, there's one that they had like 6 rows. So if you're the reporter in the 5th row and you're on a level playing field with the guys in front of you, I don't care. You're not seeing the fight. You're not seeing it the way we're seeing it even at home.
Well,
so
yeah,
it's hard.
You know, when James Toney beat Michael Nunn for the middleweight title, I had that kind of seat where I was about 4 rows back. And, yeah, it was a different angle. It wasn't as good as being right there ringside. It wasn't as good as the television eye that the camera gives you. But, you know, you do the best you can. And
you
again,
know what it's like, John?
You know,
I'll put us in where we're comfortable, in the setting we're comfortable. It's like sitting at a kitchen table with baby chairs. Dude, are you telling me you can see that plate better from that vantage point?
I hear you. No, I hear you.
You know?
The only thing I would say, though, is...
I like to throw a couple curves your way, you know what I'm saying?
I do think that I am a little worried about Golovkin getting older. It'll be interesting to see.
I'm worried about him being too pissed off to fight anymore.
Well, no, I think he still wants to fight.
1-1 at least. Do you agree? Look, even if I give Alvarez 1, I'm not giving them both.
No, I think I agree. And again, it was a draw the first time, so it wasn't a loss.
Well, that was
to
a steal. That was I don't care. They stole that. I don't care.
Mike, I'm shrugging. I don't disagree with you. It's disappointing that he didn't win the first fight. But again, I kind of agree with...
Who did the draw benefit? Alvarez, period.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. Oh, no question. No, but I agree with Golovkin's, Abel Sanchez, Golovkin's trainer, in that, look, it was razor thin. And also, I thought there were 3...
I also don't understand where you're coming with that he's old. He stood right with Alvarez.
Yeah,
I didn't know. Did Alvarez rock Golovkin? I must have missed the fight.
Well, he just... No, it was... No, his chin is...
I'm saying... I'm just trying to say, you're saying that you saw, why, because he can't knock out Alvarez? The guy's got a head of concrete.
Well, but in earlier fights, when he was slightly younger, he was able to put more pressure on other fighters. Now, that might be discounting Alvarez as a good defensive fighter. It might be discounting Golovkin's respect for Alvarez, that he didn't pressure him more. But it seemed to me, and in fact, Abel Sanchez was telling him in the corner, hey, I need more. You're losing. I need more.
You know what? I would have fired him after the fight, that trainer.
We'll see what happens
after this fight. He's made some comments since then. You know what? Let me tell you, you got to have people that have your back in the boxing game. And when your head trainer doesn't always have your back, I don't care. He sent out some bad messages, man.
You're forgetting a classic boxing moment when our dear friend Angelo Dundee was in the corner with Sugar Ray Leonard with the Tommy Hearns fight, and he said, "Kid, I need more. You're blowing it, son. You're blowing it." And sometimes you need a guy to light a fire under your ass.
Say, I think we lost the 12th round, or I think we lost this round.
Well, he said I honestly, Mike, 2 things. One, if they're going to have a rematch, they have to be diplomatic to the De La Hoya people, because right now, Alvarez and the De La Hoya people, the Golden Boy Promotions, they're the ones that are in the driver's seat about, will we get a third fight? They don't have to do it. I just don't see anyone else on the middleweight stage that is equal to Golovkin. These 2 guys
are the best, and if they were smart, they would have split this and had a huge payday. But even boxing can't get it right anymore.
So you don't think there'll be a third fight?
Well, here, I'll tell you how bad it was. Alvarez got beat so bad in the first round, they couldn't give him the win. They couldn't give him the win. They had to just say draw. So this opened them up for this. But let me ask you something. What happens if Golovkin wins the 3rd fight? That's 1-1-1. There's a 4th fight.
Maybe. Well, there have been some great 4th fights.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with that. LaMotta and Ray Robinson, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it could happen. Willie Pep and Sandy Sadler had 4 great fights.
Do we want to see Pacquiao Mayweather again?
Did you hear about that?
Yes.
Mike, I was so shocked. I didn't hear about it until Sunday morning, and It made me laugh just like you're laughing, but I will say this. I actually don't mind the idea of a rematch for 2
I don't
reasons.
either. I don't either.
Well, my reasons are, I think since that embarrassment that Pacquiao had with Mayweather, even though he lost to that Australian, I do think that Pacquiao has been refocused and dedicated to fighting better. That said, I also think, and I know you and I might disagree on this, the Conor McGregor fight with Mayweather, that's the slowest and most flat-footed Floyd Mayweather I've ever seen, and that's the first time he really looked his age. And I honestly think, much like when Bernard Hopkins and Roy Jones finally had their rematch, literally 20 years after the first time they fought, Bernard Hopkins had the advantage, and he won decisively. And if you put them both in their primes, Roy Jones should beat him every time. And I would say the same thing about Floyd, but I think Floyd has gotten very, very old in that time since he's fought, and I think he could still probably put it together and have a nice training camp, and I'm sure he would fight Pacquiao differently in a rematch, but I think it would be a more competitive fight, and I like Pacquiao's chances.
You know what's amazing is Golovkin, who to me is just a pedigree, and he even mentioned
amazing
Kovalev.
fighter, absolutely Hall of Famer, Mike, Hall of Famer, yes.
And to even mention Kovalev, don't even mention Kovalev with Triple G.
I like Kovalev a lot.
But he's not in his class.
Oh, I think he was a very good light heavyweight. Again, Andre Ward beat him in the rematch. But
well, nobody's clearly beaten Golovkin yet. But let's get to the point here as far as what we're talking about. When it comes to these guys, and when it comes to the way that they fight, styles make fights. There's no doubt that Golovkin's got one problem, John. You're right. This style that Alvarez has, and maybe changing it up, confused him. I think they knew what was coming. But I want to ask you about how certain fighters are treated and certain fighters aren't. And I want to ask you about the Russian influence, if it's anti-Russian or anti-whatever you want to call it, the European or whatever.
I don't think it's anti-national, any nationality that's non-American. I just think it's very obvious, though, that whenever it's a house promoter and because when King promoted the super fights of Ali Frazier, Ali Foreman, he was an independent promoter dealing with 2 fight camps. Golden Boy is Canelo Alvarez's fight camp. It is his management and is his promoter. Book. And so he's the house fighter. And anytime a house fighter fights an opponent, the advantage goes to the house. And it's lousy and it's wrong, but this is where modern boxing is today. And it's lousy, but that is where we're at.
Do you think that Golovkin, you said he's a Hall of Fame fighter, I want to ask you this. How come Floyd Mayweather never has to be aggressive? And they always give him the fight.
No, you're right. Well, again, he has built his reputation.
Rules. I don't like different rules for different fighters.
I'm shrugging, Mike. I don't know what to tell you. And again,
because I tell you this, Golovkin's been more entertaining in his last 10 fights that I've seen him fight than Mayweather was for his whole fight total.
Oh, I agree with that. Absolutely. But again, I would certainly say welterweight Floyd Mayweather and junior welterweight Floyd, like 140-pound, 147-pound. When he was 135 pounds, when he fought Indiana's own Angel Manfredi, for example, a fight that we saw in Vegas when he unified the 130-pound title, I think either the lightweight title or the junior lightweight title, that was when Floyd was aggressive. And he would fight, at the center of the ring, and he was lightning fast.
Everybody has non-aggressive fights. Roy Jones has won non-aggressive fights. De La Hoya won non-aggressive fights.
Yes.
Ali won non-aggressive fights. Golovkin doesn't win a non-aggressive fight.
Again, Mike, you're right. It's preconceived notions. What's that?
I thought Golovkin was aggressive in that fight. Alvarez was more. Okay, fine. It's not like Golovkin stood there and didn't throw.
No. Well, again, Mike, that's why it was that close. And again, I had 3 rounds that could have gone either way. So knowing that, I mean, honestly, there were the second round, the 5th round, and the 7th round. I spent most of that minute thinking, all right, I got to pick somebody. I don't know who to pick because it was really,
okay, then let me ask you this, because you know you're boxing. And you know what? I could care less about these punch stat numbers.
That's a television statistic. I agree.
Well, if you got to use them, you got to use them. If Golovkin was non-aggressive, how come he threw 200 more punches?
Right. Well, again, the judges, the official judges, obviously are watching the effect of the punch, how many punches, all of that stuff.
How does a judge know what the effect of a punch is unless you see a guy wince?
Well, exactly. And that's the judgment, as opposed to those punch stat numbers that are nice and they're fun for television. But again, it doesn't tell you the impact of the punch and how the other fighter is taking.
I'm just trying to say, even the non-aggressive BS that I'm hearing is full of crap when you see the punch stat numbers, and they pride themselves on that at HBO.
Sure they do.
They have 200 more punches thrown by Golovkin. There's no way you can say he wasn't aggressive.
No, I agree, Mike. I understand. And again, this is an explanation that I am hearing from ringside observers who are like, we're used to seeing Golovkin even more aggressive. Now, again, I say judge the fight in front of you, which you and I did.
Right.
And others did. And again, I think a lot of knowledgeable fight people had it for Triple G because they saw the same thing we did. They saw him being effective on the inside in a way the HBO announcers
Well, I don't know
didn't.
how the other people have the other guy. I'll be honest with you.
Well, again, it's
you can try to rationalize that they've been experienced and they watch from ringside. I've watched 55 years of boxing, and I also trust guys. Hey, Teddy Atlas posts no punches, and I think he knows more than Stephen A. Smith. So.
Yeah, but I hate when they talk to each other, Mike. That was annoying, and it's
of course it is.
It's absurd. It's absurd theater, and it's not fun. And I want to hear what Teddy Atlas has to say because, as you say, the guy's worked enough counters. He's fought enough. He knows. Stephen A. Smith, I think he's a knowledgeable fight fan. I don't think he can hold a thimble of fight knowledge next to Teddy Atlas. He's just not.
Agreed.
They're not on the same level of expertise. They're just not, and it kind of annoys me. What's that?
It's an insult to Teddy.
Yes, it is. It is. They should have another fight analyst to agree or disagree. You know, I loved when ESPN Classic used to show wall-to-wall ABC Wide World of Sports, and they'd spend like 4 hours on Muhammad Ali broadcasts with Cosell. And some of those post-Ali fight and analysts that they would do, or analysis, they'd have these guys in the studio, and it literally was Ed Schuyler from the Associated Press and literally Jack Dempsey in the 60s who still had his marbles and opinions and stuff. And I just believe...
I love Jack Dempsey.
Oh, my God. I mean, seriously, like, he's such a soft-spoken but knowledgeable man. Marciano was an excellent analyst while he was still alive. I mean, that's the thing.
Yep.
I really... again, they had Bernard Hopkins there, but Bernard Hopkins is part of Golden Boy.
Joe Clancy was good.
Gil Clancy was fantastic, and, of course, spent millions of rounds in the corners of great champions from Emil Griffith to George Foreman and people like Oscar De La Hoya, for that matter. So, no, I miss those guys. I miss those kinds of knowledgeable guys. Well, you and I have talked about it before. I always thought Marv Albert was always the best play-by-play man. I always thought Alex Wallow of ABC was the best analyst, but the best team was on, and of course Marv was doing it for NBC. The best network team for boxing was Tim Ryan and Gil Clancy. Tim Ryan was an excellent play-by-play man, and Gil was an incredible analyst.
Agreed.
Yeah, they were the best team, no question.
They were. And, don't forget, who used to call some boxing? An old friend of ours. Our guy, Dan Jiggets.
That's true. Absolutely. Yes, he was. He was a good play-by-play man. I agree with you.
Yeah, Dan did a good job, man.
Sure. Oh, that reminds me. I should actually call Dan and get him on one of these to talk boxing. I want to talk to, and again, we're talking about Chicago people, so the national audience might not know. But, of course, Dan Jiggett spent years with CBS doing network broadcasting.
Yes, he did. Former Chicago Bear, former partner of ours on the Score, great guy, and he knows his boxing.
That's true. And also Terry Boers of the Chicago Sun-Times was on the fight beat during the prime 80s years and covered the Hagler-Hearns fight live and things like that. So, no, that's, again, I mean, well, Mike, the thing is everything's about New York and L.A., and they forget the pedigree of sports that came out of Chicago. And certainly in
some
the 50s,
of the greatest fights, Lenny LaPaglia,
John Collins.
John Con, who was the guy? John Connor, was it?
John Collins.
Collins.
That's
John
right.
Collins versus Lenny LaPaglia, one of the greatest middleweight or light middleweight fights you'll ever see.
Yeah, it was middleweight.
It was great.
You're right, Mike.
Italian flag.
Our good friend Bert Sugar always said that was like one of the best contender versus contender middleweight fights you've ever seen. Absolutely,
that was a bloodbath. It was beautiful.
Well, and again, I mean, in the heyday of black and white television, and you can find these fights on YouTube. A lot of those great fights happened at the Chicago Stadium,
I was
at the
conflicted.
amphitheater. What's that?
I was conflicted. I'm Irish and Italian.
You didn't know who to vote for,
I
exactly.
couldn't lose that day. I couldn't lose it. And then Johnny Lira was a friend of mine.
Yes, Johnny Lira, sure.
Was a contender for a long, long time.
Sure.
He had some TV fights. Johnny was good. Johnny's gone now. At the end, he was starting to lose it a little bit. These boxers take such a beating. You know, everybody talks about the pedigree boxers. They get the top care. It's the guys that have to fight their way, the Mastardinis of the world that were Chicago fighters, George Mastardini, guys that have to fight their way through the Golden Gloves all the way through and try to get themselves a foothold. You know, by the time they're ready to go, they're almost shot. You know what I mean?
No, you're right. Well, and also, Mike, with the discovery of CTE, the same condition that football players have, that's why when you were saying that it'd be great to go back to 15 rounds, I don't think that's going to happen because they're discovering CTE in as much in fighters as they are in football players.
They're going to discover CTE. My mother-in-law had CTE. She never boxed.
Well, and you're right. There are occasional cases of that as well.
No,
but
I'm
clearly,
just saying that everybody's got brain damage by the end of the day. People can't remember things that were construction workers, football players, doctors.
But I you know something, Mike, when Ali died, and I know that it's against the Muslim religion to perform autopsies where they cut them open and really look around. I was saying on a lot of network sports radio programs that I was on that as much as I know it's against Ali's religion, I would hope they would consider doing it with Ali because of the CTE issue. Because I had an old girlfriend, her father was a heart surgeon at Northwestern Hospital here in Chicago. And this was during the years that Ali lived in Chicago. And we were watching the 84 Olympics. And I said, you know, and he happened to walk in.
Oh, he was bad already.
What's that?
He was bad already.
Well, exactly, and that's the thing. And I was watching with my girlfriend, and her dad came in, and he said, "Oh, John, you like boxing?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "John, I got to be honest, and I don't want to put you off of the sport, but he had seen CAT scans of Ali's head from the late 70s and early 80s, and he said, John, honestly, if you knew how to read this the way I know how to read this, you might reconsider your love of boxing." He said because Ali had a lot of head trauma.
Ali, it was up to look. If Pacheco tried to tell him that, everybody tried to talk to him. But you know what? At the end of the day, whether you're Elvis Presley and you want your doctor to write your prescriptions, or Muhammad Ali, and you not want to listen to people, you're your own man. You're an independent contractor,
sure.
and that's just the way it goes. And you know what? Ali knew. Listen to me. You know these guys know. They know what's going to happen to me. You don't think Tyson thinks 30 years from now, 20, well, maybe not Tyson.
Well, I was going to say it'll be interesting to see because Tyson didn't get his bell rung as many times as Ali.
And where would they be without boxing?
No, I understand, Mike, and I agree with you that it is a personal choice.
That's the way it goes.
Yeah, but I did you watch on HBO?
Are you going to protect everybody?
No, it's not that, Mike. Let me finish. Now, would you? Okay. I don't know if you saw when Ali passed away. And it was said, and they had Jack Nicholson talking about being with Ali in his last years.
Yeah.
And you just knew that Ali was trapped in this body that didn't work. And I even experienced that when I met Ali in 91 when I was at an ESPN fight in, Notre Dame country, South Bend.
It's tough. There's no doubt. I talked to all the Italian fighters from the Hall of Fame, the Italian Hall of Fame. Carmen Basilio I met.
Sure, I love Carmen.
All those guys, they were all punchy. But here's what I'm going to tell you. Without boxing, a lot of these guys would have been nobodies. They know it.
Oh, yeah.
They accept the fate. And look, like I've said before, my mother-in-law, God bless her, you knew Grace.
Yes.
She had Alzheimer's. She ended up with Alzheimer's. She never threw a punch in her life. It happens to everybody.
I understand
what you're saying. This might hasten it. But I'm also going to tell you this. If you told Muhammad Ali at 20 years old, that by the time when you're 65 or whatever, when you're 60, you're going to feel the effects of boxing and it's going to fuck you up. But for 40 years, you're going to be the most recognized man on the planet.
Yeah.
And you're going to have it all. He's doing it. He's doing it.
You're probably right. Yeah. I agree.
But I'm telling you, everybody is. You don't think Mike Tyson, where would he be? Where is he without boxing? Where?
Maybe, like as in our favorite movie, It's a Wonderful Life. Happy New Year to you in jail. It
You're
could
the
be.
best, Jakey. You're the best.
Hey,
You love boxing. We love boxing so much. You know, like I said the other day, and folks, you got to listen to this. Shaky's the best. Shaky and I have had many a debate on everything in life: politics, boxing, music. It doesn't matter. TV.
It's true. It's true.
This was the first time. I'm going to tell you, folks. I was stunned. Yeah, we both agreed.
Yeah.
That the fight was taken by Golovkin. No matter how we dress it up now, no matter how we talk about it, I always go by first takes, and then I watch again, and I go by second take. And if I get the same almost reaction I had from in the second take that I had from the first, then something was wrong.
No,
and that's why I think I respect your opinion, you respect mine, and I'll put our knowledge up against a lot of boxing experts any day of the week. I've seen them all, from Dwayne Bobbitt to Randall Tex Cobb
Absolutely.
to all of them. It don't matter.
Sure.
I think the kid got robbed, but you know what? We do know our stuff, and we both did agree.
No, I was pleased and glad that we agreed on this fight.
I did
and
too.
we got a million.
I said, thank God I'm not a lunatic. That what I saw wasn't a mirage.
No, I hear you, man. And like I said, I felt the same way after I read a bunch of writers both agree with us, but also it was all over the place. So that's why
I personally Borges pick so I could go the other way.
You know, it's funny, Mike. I've been trying to find what Borges thought, and I can't. Oh, I love Ron. Ron's a great, fine Boston boxing writer.
I didn't say I didn't like him. I don't always agree with him. I just get a gauge on him because sometimes I disagree with him more than off. I'd like to see what he thought because it's almost like you and me. If he agrees with us, then I'm thinking, okay, he really got robbed.
Well, like I said, Dan Rayfeld thought it was a draw, and he really went around and fought a lot.
He's the promoter, isn't he?
No. Dan Rayfeld from ESPN, and
okay.
And I think a draw would have been a more fair decision.
I agree. It should have been 2 draws. You have the third fight. That's a good point that the guy made.
And that's the thing, Mike, and truly, and Kevin, I respect Kevin Iole, and I respect all these guys, and they're all over the place. So it was that close of a fight. I hope that there.
So it should have been a draw. That's the conclusion.
Well, and again, I hope there's a rubber match, and I hope that I guess I don't know what you'd call it, because again, you're right. Alvarez has 1 win now. But I hope there is another fight because I think it's inconclusive.
Alvarez dictates. Golden Boy puts himself into this. They're in charge of negotiations.
Yeah.
If Golovkin wins, they lose power. Period.
Well, and you're right, and maybe because after 2 fights and it is that close that they're like, we don't want.
And we kind of say that we don't think the promoters have any influence.
Oh no,
we know better than
Of course they do, Mike.
We've known
Jones.
We've known them. We've known promoters. They have huge influence. Don King, I know personally. I love the guy, but there's no doubt in my mind whatever he said went.
Well, and again, Roy Jones is the kind of fighter that spent the second half of his career avoiding every big-name fighter that was a worthy opponent and would fight bums like we saw when he fought David Telesco at Radio City Music Hall. Mm-hmm. Remember, that was the weekend we saw The Sopranos in the first episode of the second season of The Sopranos.
I was Don King. I love Don King. I'm sorry, folks. If people don't like Don King, that's just the way it is. I happen to strike up a cordial relationship with him. He used to come on my show all the time.
Oh yeah, he was very funny when he. Well, that's
he was very loyal.
Well,
very
he's still around, and he's a minor factor. He is not. Bob Arum and Top Rank has maintained a huge power level on the
because
the
Don was a street guy.
Yes. We know you're right, Mike. And
he's going against a corporation.
Yep. And that's the thing. You're right. Don King's operation was a mom and pop multi-million-dollar operation.
Yeah, when he gets old, then the thing starts to decline. When Arum gets old, he's got people behind him.
Exactly right. 100%. You're right, Mike. Well, come back and we'll talk more about some of the fights we experienced together. We should really, You know what I've been thinking about doing with this podcast is going back and watching some of the great fights that we saw together and ones I was able to cover, and go back and watch them and do a fresh call and watch the fight and see if what we remember and how the fight
you want to do, man.
Eyes. So you'll come back.
When it comes to boxing, I love the game. That's why I didn't get mad the other night. It's experience. 20 years ago, I would have thrown the remote. I understand it, but I'm going to tell you something. I love the boxing game. I've loved it. I remember going to see the Norton-Bobbitt fight. And
amazing. Yeah.
Sitting down at the bar, and it was over before I could get my first. But I think so. I've been there, done that. You know what I'm saying?
I do know. And remember when Norton came in studio and he had his book and we talked to him about his book and everything, and I thought he was going to kill me because I pointed out that when he had that horrible car crash and he had to rehab himself and really relearn to speak, let alone walk and move, but everything. And at first I thought he was going to kill me. Yeah, but then I told him, like, Ken, this was your greatest victory. I'm like, this is the best thing that you ever accomplished. And then he softened up and he realized I was complimenting him. And I'm like, Ken, it was I go, seriously.
Well, it's no different than LaMotta telling me I shouldn't have brought up the
Billy Fox.
The fight.
Yeah, Billy Fox. That's right, on the TV show.
How do you believe it? It was in the movie. Yeah, but you don't bring it up.
Oh, Mike. Mike, that was one of the main tenets of the Senate hearings on boxing. I mean, there is newsreel footage of LaMotta's head hanging down and admitting, I threw the fight. So, no, I agree.
Well,
and of course, well, again, these guys.
Does LaMotta beat Alvarez?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, Mike, honestly, let's put it in.
Golovkin would give him a better fight.
Well, I agree with that, but I got to be honest. And Golovkin, I do think is a really tough fighter, and it would be interesting to match him with some of the great middleweights. But all these guys, again, they trained for 15-round fights.
Yes, they did.
They're a class ahead. I always said when I was at Sporting News Radio and De La Hoya was still in his prime, and they said, where would he fare against the other great welterweights like Tommy Hearns, Ray Leonard, but even going back to Ray Robinson as a welterweight and stuff. And I said, you could put De La Hoya in the team picture, but he better be in the back row.
Yeah.
Because Sugar Ray Leonard, Sugar Ray Robinson. Yeah, no, these
with any of these guys,
well,
no way.
Mike, it was the same thing with Marciano in his prime when he fought contenders, and other than Ezzard Charles and Jersey Joe Walcott, the other guys just weren't that good. And it's never a fighter's fault when they're in a bad era and there aren't other great fighters.
Well, you know what, John? I'll give you another sport. Tiger Woods against Phil Mickelson and Sergio Garcia for 10 straight years. Those were two guys.
Yes.
Sorry, no wonder he won. If those were your two major guys. That being said, now he's still a very good golfer, but it's a whole new ball game because there's younger guys involved that are really, really good.
How old is Tiger now?
42.
Okay, well, you know something, Mike? Just like when Jack at 47 still had one Masters left in him, until he hits 50, until he really is ready for the senior tour, it's and again, he had a great year this year, Tiger. So I can appreciate a golfer can mature into his style. God, the great Ben Hogan coming off of the car accident and having the wins
the guy
that he
couldn't
did.
even walk, and then he wins the U.S. Open, and everybody's saying Tiger's more impressive.
Well,
no, I'm sorry. No, it's not.
Agreed. I agree with you about Hogan. Absolutely. Well, and also that amazing 1960 U.S. Open of Nicholas Arnold Palmer and Hogan. And Hogan was that close.
The banter with the golf. Listen to my guy. But you're right. The thing with golf and boxing is simple, folks. And this is what I am, an educator. It's individuals that are independent contractors, like I told John earlier. You would like to tell Ali, you can tell Ali a million times, just like Priscilla told Elvis about the drugs. You know what I mean? These guys, they're too big to actually shut things down.
Well, to accept fate. Yeah, to accept fate. They know they're in control of their own destinies. You can't tell them no. No, that's what makes great athletes. And I would throw tennis in there as well, Mike.
Absolutely. Individual athletes to me, just like, look, you never know how great a great guitarist is, okay, until you hear him play a solo. I mean, I could listen to Eric Clapton with the bands like Cream he's played with and everything else.
Right,
but until I hear him, you see him do the solo at Madison Square Garden with Layla, that's when you know he's great, when he's on his own.
Yeah. No, I agree. Well, come back and let's do, because there's a million fights.
I'm on fire tonight, Shaky. I'm on fire.
You are on fire. No, this is a great conversation. And seriously, come back because, I'm putting out old conversations we had with people we encountered over the years like Bert Sugar and Bud Schulberg.
Sure.
And, guys like that we had the pleasure of really sitting down and talking boxing with. God, I wish I had some air checks of Angelo Dundee because I had some great conversations with him as well, and I know you did as well.
So. Oh, yeah. Angelo, I talked to him numerous times at the Italian Hall of Fame. I sat down at dinner with him a couple different times. And that was fun being a part of that group because they had all the connections to the Italian fighters.
Oh, yeah.
And to people like Mike Fratello, boxing guys, basketball guys. I knew
Sure.
Marv Albert. I'm eating at, I'm sitting at Rosebud on Taylor with Marv Albert and Mike
Sorta.
Fratello having fun. It was just a different time.
When I had Angelo Dundee confirm my favorite fight, or in the corner fight story about Willie Pastrano. He was fighting Jose Torres, and Torres was younger and faster and stronger and just beating the hell out of him. And the referee went to check him and everything, and he asked him a bunch of questions to make sure he was still clear-headed. And he said, "What's your name?" He goes, "Willie Pastrano." "Where are you?" "Madison Square Garden." "What's happening right now?" "I'm getting the shit kicked out of me."
That's funny. Yeah.
I like that.
They thought he was just a regular guy. They thought he was off.
Exactly. He was ready to stop the fight, and he's like, "What's going on right now?" He's like, "I'm getting the shit kicked out of me by Jose Torres." It's like, all right, you're fine. Keep going.
Stuff, man. I'll tell you, guy. Well, you want to take a break, and then we'll come back?
You mean recording-wise?
Oh, I thought we were taking a break.
Oh, no, I was gonna wrap up. I think we've been doing good.
Yeah, totally. Hey, one guy I want to bring up that's a forgotten.
Oh, sure. Before you go, absolutely. Tell me.
Aaron Pryor.
Let's talk about Aaron Pryor for a second. The Hawk. What about him?
One of the most devastating fighters ever. But when they talk about athletes who had their careers robbed because of drugs, Aaron Pryor's name, you always hear about Steve Howe. You always hear about the usual suspects, Josh Gordon with marijuana. That's nothing. Aaron Pryor was, and I know Andy from Cincinnati, who knew him, was as great as any fighter ever. It's just drugs took him down, man.
Yes, it would have been amazing seeing him fight Leonard at welterweight. And I don't know who wins that fight because of the pressure fighter that Aaron Pryor was. No, I completely agree with you, Mike. And another guy, it wasn't drugs. It was his own, I don't know, bestiality, rage, Tony Ayala, the junior middleweight.
Oh,
and
my God, I loved him.
Oh, and it was sad. And, he finally did get out of jail and had a handful of fights. And, of course, he was just too old. It wasn't the same.
Yeah, it wasn't. I'll tell you what, it's an interesting game. I don't think anybody's written the definitive book on boxing yet. I don't think they've written a complete book on boxing yet. There's millions of books on it. I've known guys Mitch Friedman, and his brother, who were great archive guys. I just don't think it's happened yet, John.
That's interesting because, Mike, I'll tell you who I think is our finest modern boxing writer, and that's Thomas Hauser. And Tom collects his articles every year and puts out a yearbook. And I think he covers the sport extensively. I used to talk to him when I worked at Sporting News Radio. He did a definitive Muhammad Ali biography in the early 2000s when Ali was still alive. And he wrote a book called The Black Lights that originally was going to be a book about Jerry Cooney.
The Black Light.
I know. And I wish I could remember, and shame on me, because it was going to be about Jerry Cooney. But Cooney, this was before he...
I love Jerry Cooney.
Oh, he's a sweetheart.
I love Jerry Cooney.
I've had personal conversations with
Jerry Cooney. That'd be fun.
He's amazing, and I hope to get him on the podcast.
Oh.
He was trained. I can't remember if it was. I think it was after the Larry Holmes fight, but he was so inactive because his management and trainer would baby him, and they just wouldn't. They and he would let him. Oh, I'm not feeling 100%. All right, we'll cancel the fight, and so that's why he could never really collect himself, and why when he fought Michael Spinks, he lost, and when he fought, obviously, George Foreman, the geezers at Caesars. And it's a shame, but my point is, instead, Tom wrote about this junior welterweight, and I'm kicking myself that I don't remember the name of this fighter, but it's an excellent book about what it was like to be a minor or a major contender in one of the lesser weight divisions, and he ended up winning a title at junior welterweight, this fighter, and it was a fantastic story because it really was a working class look at a fighter who isn't a marquee name like Jerry Cooney, and it was a very, very interesting book. The guy went on to be a judge at Madison Square Garden for fights, and it really was just another junior welterweight fighter at the end of the day, but you really understood the mechanics of promoters and managers and dealing with network television, because this is still when the three networks would have fights on Saturday and Sunday afternoons. And it was terrific. And Tom has since, like I said, he puts out these yearbooks. He's been very his coverage of Premier Boxing, the new promoter, Al Heyman.
Let me stop you here. You
Go ahead.
like the guy.
Yeah, Tom. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying.
Tom Hauser.
All right. Yeah, I'm sorry. All right, seriously, I would like to talk more at some point with you and others about Al Heyman, who is the power broker opposite Top Rank and Lou DiBella. He's one of the major promoters right now. He's the guy who promotes Deontay Wilder, the American heavyweight champion. Any thoughts on Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua, the two top middle?
I'm not a fan of either guy, to be honest. I thought Wilder would be better than he is. I don't know. I think that the competition is weak. I do. That's just me. I think that these heavyweights would get. We were just talking about fighting the fight era. I think that if they fought Frazier or any of these guys, they wouldn't last 2 rounds.
I agree.
Yeah,
but I do think it's a more balanced heavyweight division. And I do think there are guys like Luis Ortiz, the left-handed Cuban that gave Deontay Wilder his toughest fight. I think he's a threat. And I agree with you. They both have weaknesses.
Oh, yeah.
That's what makes them interesting. Because
you want to know something? Jerry Quarry would kill them both.
Oh, my God. As we always said, if Jerry Quarry had been 10 years younger, he would have been a dominant 1980s heavyweight champion. There's no question.
Ernie Shavers would rip their heads off.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
You know what? I'm going to go this far. Jumbo Cummings would give him a fight.
I don't know about that. That's a little too far.
Okay.
That's a little too far. Well, but I hear you.
Guys, you know what? These two guys, so far from what I've seen, maybe it's their competition. To me, they're fighting tomato cans for the most part, and it's hype.
That's right, Mike. That's exactly right, and especially in the case of Deontay Wilder. I mean, you got to give Anthony Joshua credit because Vitaly Klitschko, or rather Vladimir Klitschko, gave him the best fight I've seen in 25 years. Not since the first Riddick Bowe-Evander Holyfield fight have I seen a genuine heavyweight fight where the two fighters are throwing bombs at each other, and it's anybody's fight until the end.
Yep.
So,
buddy, all I'm going to tell you is the Bears are winning 7-0.
Well, that's the thing. I know. We're talking on a football Monday night where Mike's more interested in the Bears than the boxing.
No, I'm not. Oh, did it sound like you was more interested in the Bears?
Not at all. We did.
Are
good.
you kidding me?
We did good.
I'll tell you what. When it came to, I came and brought it. I came like Duran in this one. You kidding me? No. Mouth of stone. Forget about hands of stone.
It's true. No, I completely agree with you, I just want to. Yeah.
No, I'm just shocked the Bears are winning. I'm almost as shocked at that as the fact that Golovkin lost. I'm to be honest with you.
I hear you, man. Well, come back and we'll have more conversations because, again, your 50-plus years of watching, my 40-plus years of watching, we've seen a lot of boxing and we got a lot of opinions.
Sounds great, pal.
My buddy Mike North, he will be back in the future again. Lots of fights to share. As he said, he's been watching boxing for over 50 years. I've been watching boxing for over 40 years, and I think between the two of us, we will provide some interesting perspective, not only on the current matches, but also some of the great fights that we saw and the great fighters we loved through the decades. Expect that kind of conversation as well with future guests. And also, you might have heard, again, the Dempsey Tunney podcast, the first episode of the Big Bout podcast. And a lot of the voices you heard on there are extended interviews with all of those people. My dear friend Bert Sugar, the late great Bert Sugar of Boxing Illustrated and Ring Magazine. We had several great conversations over the years. I haven't kept them all, but I do have several that I will be representing on the Big Bout podcast. Also, the incredible Bud Schulberg, a controversial figure, I grant you, because of his involvement with the McCarthy hearings. He was one of the guys from Hollywood that testified and was legitimately frightened by the Red Scare of the 50s, and I know has become a controversial figure since, but an excellent sports writer. You owe it to yourself to read Bud's essays over the years that have been collected in great books. Another person that I was introduced to by Bert Sugar, and it was a pleasure and honor to know Bud. And I have nothing but respect for the man and an incredible perspective on boxing. He saw Primo Carnera and guys like young Stribling back in the 20s. And his father, B.P. Schulberg, was one of the men that ran Universal Studios in the 1920s. His family became good friends with Jack Dempsey, so he knew him as a boy. And throughout his life, an incredible career in sports and in film. He, of course, wrote the screenplay for On the Waterfront. He's the man who put the words in Brando's mouth. I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody. He wrote Humphrey Bogart's last film based on his own novel, The Harder They Fall, which was kind of a fictionalized biography of Primo Carnera and his career and his involvement with the mob. Bud knew the sport inside and out, and it was a genuine pleasure to hang with him at fights and get him on record to talk about some of the fights that he saw. And we had an amazing conversation right before the Mike Tyson-Lennox Lewis fight. And that's the conversation that I'll be presenting in a future episode of the Big Bout podcast. But also Jack Kavanaugh, the Gene Tunney biographer, a wonderful conversation, and Kavanaugh knew Tunney. So great memories of him, and a legitimate argument that in the fight records of who was the greatest boxers of all time, he really feels that Tunney should have been ahead of Dempsey, not just for the 2 wins, but really his whole career leading up to the Dempsey fights. Of course, the last fight of Tunney's career against Tom Heaney, kind of an easy defense, I guess, for his heavyweight title. But very interesting perspective from Jack Kavanaugh. I look forward to bringing you that conversation. These were longer than the half-hour documentary that I prepared for radio back in 2002, and I'm very excited to bring those to you. So, and also coming up as well in a future episode, a great conversation with Max Baer Jr. Now, you know Max from being Jethro on the Beverly Hillbillies, but of course his father, the great heavyweight champion, Max Baer Sr. If you only know Max Baer Sr. from the film Cinderella Man, you're not getting a fair portrayal of Max Sr. because he was one of the nicest and funniest men in boxing, as I learned from people like Angelo Dundee and other boxing historians who knew Max personally. And again, too much newsreel footage and radio audio of clearly Max Baer being one of the nicest guys in the world outside the ring. Inside the ring, the guy was a left-handed Mike Tyson. Every now and then, Turner Classic Movies will show a great newsreel of Max sparring. The guy was an animal. And my God, one of the greatest southpaw lefties from a talent standpoint ever to fight. It's a shame that he didn't take his training more seriously with his fight with Jim Braddock. But you can also argue that he should have had more against Joe Louis, frankly. Maybe that, again, shows you how great Joe Louis was. But as a contender, and after he lost the title, Max Baer was in a lot of exciting fights and deserves a second look if you don't know much about Max Baer. So it was great to talk to Max Jr. and get the straight story about his incredible father. And, of course, Max also had an incredible, talented brother, Buddy, who was an amazing heavyweight contender as well. So just a sample of some of the things coming up in future episodes of the Big Bout podcast. I hope you'll stick with me. I would love your input. I hope it's entertaining, and you'll find this look at boxing history as interesting as I do. And also we'll be having future authors on that have written and are writing great biographies of some of the great champions of previous decades. And don't worry, kids, I promise you, we will be talking 70s, 80s, and 90s boxing and the early 2000s as well. Certainly I've been watching all that stuff, and I have opinions. But I really think that the golden age of boxing sometimes gets neglected in the current era, and it's a pleasure to talk about some of those eras and some of those amazing fighters. So I hope you'll enjoy my trip through boxing history, past, present, and future here on the Big Bout podcast. Thanks very much for listening to this episode. Come back, more great episodes to come. Until next time, John Suntra saying thanks for listening.